This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome, episode 581. I'm Catherine Inskip, your editor and host. Our story for today is Never Thought He'd Go by Francois Harvey. This story was first published in the 2016 Bristol Short Story Prize Anthology and Best British Short Stories 2017 from Salt Publishing. Francois Harvey lives in the northeast of England. She has had work published in The Dark, Best British Short Stories 2017, Black Static, Interzone, The Lonely Crowd, Nitro, TSS, Confingo and others, as well as a standalone chapbook, Guest, published by Nightjar Press. She was shortlisted for the 2016 Bristol Prize and 2016 Bridbort Prize, won a 2017 Northern Writers Award, Children's Fiction and YA, and was awarded a DYCP grant from Arts Council England in 2021. She's trying to put a short story collection together. This story is narrated by Phil Lunt. Hailing from the rainy northwest of England, Phil has dabbled in many an arcane vocation during his lifetime. From attempted rock star to conveyor belt scraper, Easter egg wrangler to world's worst waiter. Sometime actor, designer and infrequent writer, he now works behind the scenes at a clandestine government agency and still doesn't know what he wants to be when he grows up. Yes, he's that bloke who was once a teabag in a national TV ad campaign and who has an entry on Wikipedia. At some point he'll stop messing about with his biography. You can find him on Twitter as @Phil_Lunt and on Blue Sky as Phil L. Zibob. And now, we've a tale to tell.
Never Thought He'd Go by Francois Harvey. Narrated by Phil Lunt. Fell off the church spire, said Davy. Gravestone landing on him, said Davy too. Trampled to death by cows when he cut through the wrong field home, said Saz. Not to death, said Davy. To death means actually dead. He's just a bit bashed up like. Broken arm, 3 broken ribs, black eye, bust collarbone, top of his foot smashed and plenty of bruises elsewhere, said everyone, though no one could agree how he got it all. Norm's mum had her own ideas. She ambushed us outside Mrs. Lambert's bit shop while we were arguing over how to spend a £5 we'd found. She was fresh off visiting Norm at the hospital. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd had bees at them, and her makeup was all smeared so her face was difficult to set straight to the eye. We felt bad for her. Felt double bad, because she wasn't far wrong with the direction of her anger either. You all! You there! You bleeding lot! I know you had something to do with it. He wouldn't go gallivanting about without you pushing him into it. He could have died. I'll pin the lot of you, you mark my words. We didn't do anything, Mrs. Eames, said Davy, perfect mix of irritated and innocent. We were all home. We all didn't lay a finger on him. The rest of us nodded and hum hard. Norm's mum jerked her head back so she was looking at us through slit eyes, down the line of her nose. We must have looked smaller that way. The whole gang had shot tall over the summer and carried it well too. She sniffed like she smelt something bad off us. Yous all are lying little rats. Norm'll say what happened when he's up, and then I'll come knocking on every one of your doors, every last one. And I'll have the hats with me. She jabbed a finger at each of us, long sharp nail tasting blood and handbags swinging from her fist like she wanted to skip the police and just get stuck in. Delinquents, the lot of you. We waited a solemn few minutes after she was gone before anyone said anything. It made us uncomfortable to see an adult so close to tears and so close to walloping us in one breath. Wonder what did happen to him, said Saz. Place is haunted like we said, warned him, didn't we, said Davy. I thought that was a joke, said Davy too. Like, that was the point of the day. It was a joke. Never thought he'd do it, I said. None of us thought he'd do it. We'd known Norm Eames since we were all little kids, and he wasn't up to much. Two things you could rely on Norm for: tall tales and bravado like a balloon. Puffed round him, and one push a bit too hard, and he'd burst or be away. Or both. We would have liked him more, probably, if he'd admitted to being scared of everything, or when he was hurt or something. But he never did. Like, Norm fell off his bike and told us he wasn't crying, no. He'd hit his head, and his eyes were bleeding, so he needed to go home. You got water for blood, Davy had said scornfully, and Norm had shouted that David didn't know what he was talking about, and he kicked his bike and then run for his house. That sort of thing. But he kept hanging round us. He was dogged, always at heel, always eager, and then yapping and running away at the last minute. So you get why we didn't think he'd try for an overnight in the church. Not our fault if the gump went through with it, I said. But is it haunted though? Were we joking about that or not? Said Davy too, half his fist in his mouth, like he does when he's getting agitated. I was joking, said Saz. I wasn't, said Davy, and he grinned at us all, with his teeth only, lips stretched thin, eyes blank. Everyone knows it's haunted. There's a graveyard. It's about 500 years old. Fella died in the clock tower, like I said. Haunted. We turned and considered the roof of the church, poking up over the top of the bit shop. You could see the whole village from the top of the spire. We knew, because we'd seen photos taken by someone who'd gone up there in a hard hat and a high-vis jacket and not peeped a word about a ghost. She'd gone up in daylight, though, with a guide and a torch, probably. We'd sent Norm up in the dark. But we never thought he'd go, that was the thing. Norm wouldn't sneak out on his mum, not a chance. Not without someone pulling him from his room. And none of us had. I've had Mrs. Eames on the phone, said Mam, as she clattered dishes around fast for dinner. Ran a restaurant, me Mam, so she doesn't do food slowly, and it's embarrassing having friends over. No such thing as beans on toast round our place. In a right state. It's the hypothermia that's made him proper ill, she says. And he was always easily bruised. She says he's in shock, and if whoever was with him had taken him to the doctor, he wouldn't be in such a bad shape. Mam paused, drizzling something sticky over the salad, and looked at me sideways from under her lashes. Barely a look at all, but you know she's watching. She's sure someone must have been with him. There wasn't a question mark, quite, but she let the silence hang till one grew, and it fair hung off the spire of the church, mocking me through the window. The downside to being able to see the whole village from the church spire was that you could see the church spire from most anywhere in the village. I could see it from a bedroom window too. Weren't nothing with us, Mam, I said, and chewed more lettuce than I could swallow. Kids' games, she said, I'm sure. But if I find out otherwise... She let that hang too, and it was worse than the question. I called Saz. Norm's mum had been on at her dad too, and Saz was spitting fire, locked in a room till she told the truth, or her dad gave up on it. Not even supposed to have the phone, she whispered. It weren't even us. Davy, wasn't it? You think Davy went out there with him? No, said Saz. I just mean it's always him, pressing the buttons. He always the mouth, don't you notice? But I bet he wouldn't have gone either. Too wimpy. Never thought there'd be anything up there to knock anyone round mine, let alone Norm. You know, Norm. There was admiration in her voice though, and I thought of the way Norm had looked sideways at Saz when we'd dared him to go to the church, and the red on his face and the sneer on hers. Wondered if it'd all be worth it if he could hear that grudging note. Do you think he fell? I said. Cows, she said. He was found on the edge of the graveyard, and that's the cow field. Killer cows, we all know it. Like we know about the ghost, I said, sharp. Sure, said Saz. She hung up on me. I went to bed wondering if I could sneak into the hospital and visit Norm without the others spotting me, or Norm's mum for that matter. Either way would end in a bollocking. I just wanted to check on him, let him know we felt bad for him. Even Mam, who didn't really have much patience for Norm or his mum, figured it was serious. So it was. I tried to sleep, but it was a bright moon night and my curtains didn't fall properly shut, so the light slipped through the gap and greyed up my room like an unhappy sun. Eventually, I gave up, got up and looked for an old badge or something to pin it shut with. I was pulling the material tight to itself when I looked out into the dark and caught a wink of light over at the church, from the bell tower. Flash and gone. Flash and gone. Flash and hold, like it had spotted me at the glass and was watching. I fumbled the pin into the curtain and flung myself back under the covers. In the morning, Mam came into my room looking tired and gaunt and told me that Norm had died in the night. She held me while I shook and cried. Then she fed me a bit of dry toast and warned me that the Hats would be knocking, because now it wasn't just a bashing, was it? "Trampled to death," said Saz. She tried to put a bit of "I told you so" into it, but she was sunk as the rest of us. Her lips were dry. Davy too looked like he would cry any second. "You were younger than me," he said, like this was new information. "Younger than all of us," said Davy. "The ghost doesn't care about age." "Shut up about that ghost," said Saz. "It's not funny now." "It was never a joke," said Davy. "My mum said it was hypothermia that did for him," I said, wanting to get the conversation away from ages and ghosts. "If he'd been left somewhere warm, he would have been okay." "Like he would have landed in a warm bath after he fell from that height," scoffed Davy. "Fuck you," said Davy too, shocking us all to silence. "He was younger than us, and we sent him up that there, in the dark, on his own. Don't none of you feel bad at all?" He glared at us, and then the glare crumpled, and he turned away, shoulders hunched. Dropped his crisp wrapper in the bin and walked off without looking back. "Touchy," said Davy. "He's right," said Saz. I nodded. We fell silent again as Norm's mum hobbled past. She had a couple of other women with her, holding her up it looked like. Couldn't even tell you where she'd been or where she was going. But as they drew level with us, she stopped, and her entourage stopped with her, and they all stood, swaying slightly. We shrank back into the shadow of the bit shop, waiting for the blows to land, or the words. She raised her head with effort and looked at us. Her face had collapsed in on itself with grief, like she'd been crying so hard she'd swallowed her teeth and her eyes had fallen back in her face. Her stare was unfocused, but it held us all the same. After a long while, one of the women gently squeezed her shoulders, murmured something in her ear. The group of them shuddered back into motion, shuffled off down the street. Normal time and normal sounds returned. "I'm away home, lads," said Davy, blinking like he'd just woken up. He dropped his crisps and fair ran off down the alley. Saz sighed and crumpled what was left of her crisps in her hand. "There was a light," I said. "Yeah, I saw," she said. "I was going to visit him today." "Me too," she said. "What do you think really happened?" I asked. "Killer cows," she said firmly, and then she took a deep breath like the next words would cost her. "Or that freak Davy, playing ghost." "We wouldn't do anything like that," I said, sure of it. "Sure we wouldn't," she said. She went home and I threw up, suddenly, on the side of the bin, and Mrs. Lambert came out of the shop and shouted at me. I couldn't sleep for watching out for that light, and watching out for the Hats, and wondering what the payback is for the person who didn't do anything really, but didn't do the right thing either. Like, probably hundreds of times. The funeral was a Friday, and it was the last week of the holiday. The overriding feeling at the crematorium was resentment that Norm hadn't had the decency to wait another few days. The whole class turned up, of course, and even though Davy too was still not talking to us, and even though Saz couldn't look at Davy without flinching, we flocked at the back of the crowd out of habit, carefully out of the way of Norm's mum's roving, vacant stare. The Eames were regular churchgoers. They had a family spot and everything, but it would have been bad taste, we supposed, to bury Norm in the graveyard where he'd been found. "Vicar's proper upset," whispered Saz to me, as we waited for the service to start. Nerves had her running her mouth off. "Says it's hard enough getting people through the door as it is." "Shut up," said Davy too. "They're starting." It was excruciating, the whole thing. Who knew that so many people had nice things to say about Norm Eames? Davy too cried during the singing, and Davy looked like he wanted to smack him upside the head for it. Saz whispered to herself the whole time, so quiet that I'd no clue what she was saying. I counted every freckle on the back of my own hands. When we filed outside, nearly the first ones out, we stood awkwardly for a second, trying not to look in the direction of the church. "It's done then," said Davy. "What is?" snapped Saz, and if her voice had teeth, there would have been blood. Davy looked at her like it was a stupid question. "Well, that's it, isn't it? He's gone. Hats have been and gone. End of the matter." "Have you not seen the light?" said Davy too, sounding faintly ridiculous, like an old-time preacher. "What light?" said Davy, and he said it so viciously that we knew he had. His eyes were nearly as red with anger as Davy too's were with sorrow. "The ghost light? I told you. It's not a damn ghost." Saz got right up in his face, and then more people poured out of the crematorium. So we all took a breath and a step away. "Prove it," said Davy, and Davy too groaned. He kicked the dirt and walked away without looking at any one of us. And then we were three and, just like last time, we agreed we were meeting Saturday, midnight, at the edge of the graveyard. Just like last time, I lay in bed and twitched the minutes away. I tried not to think what would happen if there was a ghost, or if Mam woke up and saw my bed empty, or if Mam didn't wake up and there wasn't a ghost, and how stupid would we feel? This time, though, I couldn't shake that maybe there hadn't been a ghost before, but there would be one now, and it'd be Norm, and by Christ would he have it in for us. Just like last time, come 11:15, I could hear Mam's whistling snore starting up at the other end of the house. Come 11:30, my feet and hands had gone numb and cold with fear, and I didn't fancy I could pull myself out of bed even if I wanted to. Come 11:45, I should have been dressed and gone. I sat on the edge of the bed with one sock on and my jumper over my head and shivered. Norm's ghost. In the bell tower. Norm's ghost. Drifting through the graveyard. Norm's ghost. Crying tears of blood and wielding all the power that ghosts get when they've come to avenge their deaths. Come midnight, I sat at my bedroom window, not daring to touch the curtains, but staring through the gap. The moon had thinned, so the village was less lit than the night before, and the church was a shadow. But I watched just the same for Saz and Davy and the light, which came again. Flash and gone. Flash and gone. Flash and on. 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 I fancied I saw a face behind it. I fancied I saw them through the church walls, climbing up what were surely rickety and dusty steps. I fancied a scream cut in the air, but it was the owl in the oak 2 doors over, and the wind besides. None of this was like last time. Last time, I'd slept the night through, with the relief of a coward in a good hiding place. Mam answered the door to the Ats while I was brushing my teeth through my yawns. She called me down and I came, stupid, in my idiot childish pyjamas and my purple toothbrush still in one hand, and I knew straight off, or thought I did. There were 2 of them, both women, and both of them looking too sympathetic for it to be good news or suspicion. "There's been an accident, love," said Mum, just like she had when she'd got the call about Norm. "They've got some questions." Not Saz. Not Davy. Or maybe Davy, but please God, not Saz. "Were you out with David Tunnall last night?" said one of the Ats. I couldn't tell them apart through their uniforms. And then, I don't know how I answered, because I tried to tell them there was no way Davy 2 would have been out last night. He wasn't speaking to any of us, I think I said. He walked away, I think I said. And we said we'd go, but I didn't go. And none of us did that time, or likely this time, and I didn't go anyway, and... Panic took my words and rushed them through without any of my mind taking part. I know I asked if he was okay, and they said, he's very ill. He's in hospital. We're trying to find what happened. I asked if I could see him. They said family only. And then Mam held me while I shook and cried. I didn't go out to our place at Mrs. Lambert's bit shop where the others would be. We'd be pitied, I knew. And we'd be looking at each other like Norm's mum had looked at us. The loss of us, with Davy 2 lying up in the hospital, was more than I could face. But I knew. Everyone knew. Broken wrist, broken jaw, 2 broken ribs, black eye, broken nose, punctured lung, ankle smashed, and plenty of bruises elsewhere. Left cracked and freezing at the edge of the graveyard, and no one could agree on how. I sat in the garden, my back to the church, and stared at the clear horizon down the hill. No ghosts that way, no spire, no bell tower, no Norm. Just hills down to fields, and the river rolling by. I heard the doorbell jangle, and Mam murmur low and send away whoever it was. We passed a quiet weekend. Mam made beans on toast for Sunday, and let me watch shite TV. And on Monday morning she grit her teeth at me in sympathy, and packed me back to school with the rest, all the same. We ran into each other just outside the school gate, like we'd planned it for a stage show. I sort of wish we had, just for the sake of the rubbernecks and sticky beaks who fell quiet when they saw us. We could have put something good together, a showdown, the grand finale. But instead we slowed and fell quiet as well, and the space between us and the gap where Davy 2 should be pulsed and pained, till Saz spoke. I didn't go, she said. My da locked me in. I hugged my relief to myself. I didn't go, said Davy, with twist to his lips. Of course I didn't. It's haunted, like we said. Saz looked like she'd lamp him, and took half a step, but he stared her down. Killer cows? He spat on the ground between them. I told you. He didn't even smile this time. He'd got skinnier, toothier, in the past week. His eyes had gone dark. I told you all it was up there. We left him outside the gates and went to face the whispering mob. That night, the light at the church went flash and gone. Flash and gone. Flash and gone. Flash and on. And on.
This is a marvellously creepy tale, isn't it? There's a really solid sense of place in this piece, and I love the author's choices of vocabulary and slang throughout. The hats, bit shops, Norm's mum. It resonates of a not quite nostalgic, not quite here, small Northern English community, especially with the freedom the children have in their almost feral explorations. The tensions and teasing dance along a knife edge of friendship and rivalry, and it's ever so well realised as a community. I love the creeping menace of whatever is drawing the children out, and how the explanations never quite come together. The story's events create ghosts in their wake. But to some degree, isn't that always true of childhood? Even without experiencing sudden death. Sometimes our childhoods hold darkness that doesn't want us to escape. As a metaphor, I think this story captures that rather well. Join us again soon. We love bringing you the best audio fiction week after week, but we can't do it without your support. Your donations pay our authors, our narrators, our servers and our staff. Please consider supporting us with a monthly donation through either PayPal or Patreon. You can also review us on Apple Podcasts, request us on Spotify, and consider the stories we publish for award consideration. There are lots of ways you can help. Join the discussion. on EA Discord and visit on Twitter and Blue Sky at Cast of Wonders. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is brought to you by editor Catherine Inskip, assistant editors Kappa Cobb and Alicia Caparaso, associate editors Tanya Adelit, Amy Brennan, Somto Eheswe, Amanda Kong, Ray O, Simon Pan, Samuel Poots, Emma Smales, Denise Sudell and Rin Yi. Our editorial assistant is Amy Brennan, our community manager is Denise Sudell, and our audio producer is Jeremy Carter. Cast of Wonders is part of the Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 non-profit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can download or listen to the episode on any device you like, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme music is Appeal to Heavens by Alexei Nov, available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thank you for listening.